Good afternoon, Facebook, YouTube. Here at Real Estate Power Play, we have a very, very exciting episode for you guys. We have a guest, Matt, one of Marty's friends. I'll let him do a beautiful introduction that he did for me as well before this started. But Matt has been in the commercial space. He started on the single family space, and he is absolutely crushing it. We had a really awesome conversation. And he said something, guys, that I want to drop. He said it just off the cuff that I thought I absolutely love. So, Matt, I'm gonna steal your words from you. But he says he believes wholeheartedly that he can do well and do good at the same time. Guys, it's so powerful. And just in the few moments that I've talked to him, very passionate. He's got an awesome long-term goal, and I'm really, really excited, Matt, to get to know you and have this conversation. And Marty, if you want to kick off and maybe do your little introduction for us.
Yeah.
And get started, man.
And, for those who don't know Matt, that's through like the Upstate New York Real Estate Investors Group. He was really the inspiration for it. Before he had a little baby, he couldn't give as much time as probably he'd like to stuff like that. So I kind of took that idea and the baton of that, and it's been wonderful. But Matt was one of the first thought leaders as a millennial in Rochester to do stuff with real estate and really give back to aspiring investors and even people who had been in the business for a while, just kind of giving them some more. Hey, here's some tactics I've used. Matt is someone who, he really. I think he's a great ambassador for real estate. He's a great and Rochester too. He wants both to do well, and just like Ronnie said, there's a way to do both, make money and do good. And I think Matt is the symbol of that. So, anyways, without further ado, Matt Drouin, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it. I'm very excited to be on. Talk about commercial.
Let's talk about commercial, right? So. We had our event, Matt and I, for those who don't know, the Go Bigger event. It was flawless, sold out. Millions of people wanted in. They couldn't get in. We had to stop them. There was some, we had to shut the doors. Oh, everyone's pounding on it. It was crazy. But all right, Matt, so let's get into it. Why don't you tell people, for those who don't know, who didn't go to the Go Big event, kind of who you are, how you got started, and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I got my start in as a residential real estate agent for a company that used to be called Nothagal Realtors, and it was the only career I could find out of college. I graduated in 2006 from SUNY Geneseo State School, and we were sort of like the peak of the economy. No companies were hiring, liberal arts degree students with a general business degree and no business experience. So I had the opportunity to get my real estate license and work under my father's wing because he started full time in real estate about 5 years, 5-6 years before I got in. He had always been a realtor, but he did real estate and he started off as a general laborer at Genesee Brewery. Drink what we can and sell the rest. And he showed houses on nights and weekends. So I think went full time. Greatest thing he ever did was he's like, I'm not going to give you any business. You got to hunt down and kill your own business, but I'll show you what it takes to succeed. So that's how I got my start in real estate. And he kicked me out of the house. So I had to either get an apartment with my friends or find a small multifamily deal to own or occupy. I liked not paying rent, living at my dad's house. And so I kind of wanted to stay on that same track. So
That's
so
awesome,
your first start was a
man.
house hack. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yes.
Why don't we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
And what
So
that is. I was surprised that people didn't know what that was at the Go Big event. Maybe because I'm just so freaking, my brain is so in on it, and Bigger Pockets taught me all that stuff. So, but for some people, they don't know. So what is that?
Yeah. So house hack is, I mean, it can be so many different things, right? I happen to find a 4-family property that I moved into one of the units. I got a roommate as well. There was an attic to this apartment building that was like, it was the old servants' quarters of the building. I moved up there. It wasn't even legal living space, but but if I'm the owner, I could live in the basement if I want to, right?
That's right.
And I got a roommate, and I was making like $200 a month cash flow while having all my living expenses paid in terms of like, my housing expense, which is a major expense for a lot of Americans. Let's face it. So that's really where I got bit by the bug. I was like, damn, I realized like how hard I had to work selling a $40,000 2-family in the city of Rochester, and earn $1,800 in commission, where I was making, had $1,800 in rent checks coming, magically into my mailbox every month. So that's where I really got exposed to that, the passive-ish, concept. We always hear about passive income or residual income, but until you experience it firsthand, like, oh, I got paid for doing nothing. Like, that is really, really the magic thing there, because we only have 24 hours in a day. We don't have a 25th hour. So that's really where you can really leverage yourself and become a master of time, and also a master of space too, being real estate as a choice.
Dude, that's so cool. Like the idea that you kind of looked at that expense, said, okay, I like not paying rent right now, living with my dad, but I'm getting kicked out. How can I replicate this? Right? Like a lot of people, they're just like, oh man, I got to bite the bullet. But you kind of jumped out of that box. You're like, okay, how can I replicate this? I can own this. I can jump in here. So you got started. You learned to be kind of a finder, a hunter, to go out there and kill, and kind of walk through it. What led you from there to now owning multiple commercial buildings, to, moving into your projects? Like what led from that initial experience jumping into house hacking? How'd you get into the commercial world where it's like, okay, now I'm building this empire per se, right? That, man, I maybe did a few single family deals, if that's what you did, or what was that journey from, all right, now I'm living here, to what you have now?
So I was very comfortable with multifamily. So I started buying more multifamily properties, and each deal I did, I took like a little special nugget out of it, right? So the second 4-family property that I bought had no money. So that was the first deal. Actually, got a hard money lender to cover the acquisition and rehab for that property, refinanced that property, and owned a property that grossed $60,000 a year with none of my own money out of pocket, right? So that was like, so each deal I did was always like this, like my journey was so incremental. It's looking back on it, that's kind of how I was. It's like I was always person to like taking baby steps. I wasn't very confident, but I was confident enough to kind of push the envelope a little bit each time. The first time I got exposed to commercial, let's say commercial financing, was when I bought my first 6-family property. And so that one, I was like, I saw what I pushed the property in terms of value, in terms of like I pushed the value by a couple $100,000 over a year period. And I was like, I could have never done that before with a 4-unit or less. So it's just this sort of step, right? My first exposure to actually buying a actual property that had a commercial like tenant base, like retail, was a mixed use building. There was 2 commercial storefronts and there was 4 apartments. Very comfortable with multifamily, right? I was like, well, and that deal scared me. I was like, what if these storefronts go vacant for like 6 months, a year, 2 years? But then I looked at it, I was like, well, those 4 apartments for what I'm buying as are covering the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, the repairs and maintenance, all that stuff. So if I lease these storefronts out, that's just going to be pure profit, right? So that's kind of how my evolution. It was slow. It was very, very incremental steps. I always tell people you don't have to do it like I did and take 13 years to become financially independent. You can literally do it in in 2 to 3 years. So that's why I'm out there always advocating for, go big or go bigger, right? That's what was the foundation of our event, is that, it's like, don't be a little baby like I was, but it worked for me. I wouldn't change anything. But I always advocate for, thinking bigger and, being uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable when you feel that discomfort it means you're doing something right.
Yeah, no doubt. So real quick, because you said something about pushing value. I think that's important in regards to commercial, because I want to stick with commercial. This is the show. That's what it's about. So how does someone push value on, I don't care if it's a 5 unit or 105 unit, what does that look like for people listening?
So once you get to 5 units or more, or you have some type of commercial component, whether it's retail, office, industrial, whatever, bank appraisers value that property based upon net operating income, or NOI. So if you can figure out a plan to increase value by increasing rents and just stabilizing expenses, that's where you're going to increase value. And when you're buying desirable properties that are like lower cap rate, or at least valued at lower cap rate in your subject area, based upon, I love Rochester, right? So I go after the most desirable areas, because every dollar of net operating income that I can add to the bottom line is explosive to the value, which means I can get in and execute my business plan and refinance and pay my investors back, right? So that's where, you increase value on commercial. You're not a slave to sales comparables, which you are in, single through 4 family.
Yeah, you said something too that I think is interesting, and you mentioned this at the event. You talk about a business plan for almost every property that you've bought. And I think some people go into it with very much like a cowboy approach, where let's just see what happens. And that's worked out well for us at times here at Duplex. But I really do, when there's something that's, we're talking, multi-million-dollar deals, these do require a business plan. What do you look at, when you're maybe building a business plan, and what does that mean for people when they're buying a property? Like, hey, this is why you have a business plan. Is it for the investors? Is it for yourself? Is it for the bank? What does that look like when you're building a business plan? And what do you mean by a business plan?
A business plans used to scare the hell out of me, right? When I was going to school for business, real estate is the easiest type of business to write a business plan for. You have so much data out there to support. It's like, we always have a shortage of housing or buildings, that sort of thing. You can go out there, you can look at, all right, what are my projected rents going to be? And you have that data that's out there. It's not like you're inventing a new product and trying to create a market for something. The market is already there. So if you look at a building that, has rents that are $500 per unit, and similar type product is renting for $750 a month, or, something that your product could be that, I start from the revenue side of things first. And then I take a look at the expenses. What are the existing operating expenses? What type of capital improvements can we make to decrease long-term operating expenses over time? And how do I keep those expenses stable so they're not growing at a higher rate than what the revenue is on a property, let's say. So that's kind of the approach that I do, and I just formulate a critical path of that. And that is, it's actually probably the simplest part of my job. Like, the hardest part of the job is actually implementing the damn thing, right? It's finding the opportunity. It's raising the money. So the plan is pretty easy, and it takes me like a couple hours to put together a business plan on a property.
So in that business plan, to that execution being kind of okay, I've done my research, I've looked at this building, I've done the research, I've done my due diligence, executing that, and you jumped in, you started building incrementally And for those who want to go bigger, I mean, my assumption is it wasn't just all sunshine and rainbows when you jumped in, right? Like it wasn't just like, oh, I jumped in and everything worked out. What are some of those challenges and roadblocks you found yourself kind of running into, and that are common things that people will run into? Like if I jump into commercial, and let's say like right now we're just looking at an 8-unit to look at, right? Like what are those common things that I think a lot of people are like, man, I'd love to get in, but I just don't know what I'm going to run into, and I don't want to be crippled. What are some of those things you realize, hey, I have to learn this. I have to kind of blossom and come out of my cocoon and really turn into a multifamily investor?
I think that being very conservative on what your projections are from, an expense standpoint and also an income standpoint, and also on your, capital improvement side. We've done some really simple value add deals. Like there's office buildings that I bought where, all the offices were in great shape. All I had to do was just increase the rents up to market value, right? I didn't have to do a damn thing to any of those offices. And then we've had extremely heavy value add type deals. Like there's a 22-unit mixed use building that we kind of had these case studies at the event on Saturday. That was, much, much more extensive in terms of rehab. I would probably prefer not to do a deal like that again, because the more you add in terms of the value add side, when you're talking about heavy value add, we're talking about, mechanicals, plumbing, like the whole 9 yards, gutting, having to gut apartments down to the studs. You're just adding way more risk and variables to that. So if you're going to take on a project like that, you just have to make sure to be conservative enough on the high side of where those numbers are going to be to do that. And then the implementing part is, that's the toughest thing for me. I'm envious of, Marty and Matt. They rehab properties all the time. I hate rehabs because of, the unknowns, the scope creep that happens, that, you can put a budget out there with all the contingencies you can in there, and sometimes you just blow through that budget. So that's probably the most difficult part of it. In terms of, projecting rents, always shoot lower than you think you're gonna get. I'm always gonna, take what's, rent comparables out there, even in a product that's going to be inferior to what I'm going to create, and I'm going to underwrite it for that, being less than projected less than what the comparable product is out there. So that way you're not going to disappoint your investors. You're always going to pleasantly surprise them. So, and you're going to pleasantly surprise yourself, even, but at the end of the day, you're going to know that, sometimes there's some of these projects that have taken years off my life. So
how does somebody find investors, right? So, you're finding deals, they're out there, and I want to talk a little bit about, how you find your own deals, but what's like a first step for somebody who, maybe has done a deal or two, and they've been using commercial banking. They've been kind of using their own name on a lot of stuff. So what's the next step, Matt? Is it telling people what you do? If that's the case, what do you say? Enlighten us a little bit on that, because you've done a great job with this.
I think that the important thing is, I've always started from being known as the go-to person on a particular subject matter, right? So that's why I put so much into, being guests on podcasts, doing events, putting a lot of hopefully valuable content on social media. And then, I'm so obsessed with real estate. I'm just always talking about it, even at family gatherings. Sometimes, like, I have family members that are just annoyed by it. I like to talk about business. I like to talk about ideas, and I like to talk about real estate. And I like to talk about food too. So, but primarily, that's what you get to be known for. And then, if you have somebody that is starting to like sort of lean into those conversations, it's not just a talking about me type of thing. It's like, hey, have you had any interest in doing that? Oh no, I don't really want to deal with tenants and, trash and toilets and that sort of thing. What do you do if you get a call in the middle of the night and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, I have people that invest with us that just want to get mailbox money and don't want to have to deal with it. And it becomes our problem, not your problem. So if I had a deal that came across our way that we're doing a raise for, would you be interested in taking a look at it? And it just starts like that, right? And then, you put them on your distribution list. And sometimes there's people that I've sent opportunities to that have never even opened the email before, right? But thankfully, we have way more investors than we do opportunities. So, raising money for a deal is at least up until this point has not been a problem. I do foresee that with changing interest rates and stuff like that, and people losing consumer confidence, that it's going to be more of a heavy lift in the future. But we already have that solid database of investors that we already have relationships with. So that's kind of how the conversation starts.
Guys, and for you guys who are listening, I think this is so key, because I think a lot of us are caught up in what are we going to say, right? And listen to what Matt just said. He just talks about the things he's passionate about. He talks about business. He talks about what he's building. He talks about real estate, and then he provides an opportunity, right? He says, hey, this is what I'm working on. And then if they're like, well, I don't want to deal with that, because a lot of people, because I think this is one thing that I've run into is people like the idea of real estate, but especially if they have money, they're like, man, I don't want another small business, right? Like, I don't want to deal with tenants. I don't want to run that, right? Especially if they're in their 50s or 60s and you're talking to them, they're like, look, I worked 60 hours. Like, I'm not interested in that. But what they are interested in is multiplying their cash, right? They are interested in growing the money and allowing it to work with them. And they want to know that the person they're trusting that money with, like in my experience, is, are you competent, right? Do you know what you're doing? Do you have a solid plan for this money? And I would imagine, Matt, just with what you're talking about, is as you're talking to him, it's not like you're sitting there trying to convince everybody, right? You're not trying to convince, you're just having a conversation saying, here's the opportunity. And either they're like, yeah, just send it to me. Or like what you said, they just overlook, they don't even open the email because they're not interested. You're not pounding down the same people's door over and over again. It's just the more value you're adding, it kind of just attracts. Would you say that's accurate? Or would you say you're like beating your head up against the wall trying to find the money and convince people?
Yeah, I never want to be in the business of convincing or persuading people, especially when it comes to having an opportunity to take on people's money. I have mentees of mine that we have conversations about this, and I always ask them, like, do your first deal first, put yourself in harm's way first before you put somebody else in harm's way potentially. So I think that when you start having the experience, it can help you build the confidence over time, so that once you've done a couple of deals, I mean, like for crying out loud, I mean, Joe Fairless, who's like a real estate titan, when he owned 4 single family houses. Okay. And then he went on to, raising millions and millions and millions of dollars. And he's on track to own over $1 billion worth of real estate. But he started small and didn't go through the whole painful incremental approach that I did. Right. So I think that, as long as you have an opportunity, like a real opportunity, like I know it sounds cliche, raising the money is so easy. It is so easy.
So how did you learn this, right? How did you learn? You said, your father was kind of, how did you learn was it just by doing? Did you go to an event like what you put on? Like if someone in the crowd's like, because a lot of our audience is in the single family realm, and they might be dipping into commercial and thinking about it. And I know that my business and what I'm looking at with storage units and some stuff, I know Marty and Matt are really getting into it. And I think a lot of people are like, I don't necessarily know how to dip it. Should I go to the Go Big or Go Bigger event next year? Should I connect with people? Should I read a book? Should I listen to a certain podcast? Like, I want to get involved. What should I do? Like, what was that journey for you, and what would you recommend?
So I think that, I'm definitely thoughtful, but also in terms of being cautious and aware of the value of managing risk, but I still have this, like, I'm going to figure it out mentality. I prefer, instead of like, pushing and that sort of thing, I prefer to get, pulled into things, because getting pulled on a wakeboard is a lot easier than trying to, to swim and push a boat. Right. So, I just, Grant Cardone, coined, commitment breeds creativity, right? So if you commit to it, like, you're going to figure it out. But if you are, if you just stay a content zombie, okay, it's like, oh, I just need to listen to one more podcast. I need to go to one more event, or I need to pick this one more person's brain. Like, there's people that I've known for literally over 10 years. Every time I am at a cocktail hour with them and that sort of thing, they're like, yeah, I think I'm going to do it this year. I was like, buddy, you've been talking about that for 10 years. Like, when are you going to do something? Like seriously, like, this has got to be so painful. It would be I'd feel much better about it that if you just said, hey, not for me, like, must be nice, but not for me. So I think you just got to end up doing something. And I think that the first deal is the most important thing. I think I coined the dad principle. It's do a deal, damn it. Okay. So, because I think that a lot of people, it's like, well, do I do single family or multifamily? Do I do short-term rentals or long-term rentals? Do I do commercial? Do I form my LLC right now? By the way, form an LLC if you haven't already. Okay. Like, you're going to need it eventually. Okay. So those types of things there is that, just the analysis paralysis, and we're hardwired as, in terms of our caveman brains, like to, be cautious and not want to take risks and do new things. So you're going to have to, like, upgrade your operating system, bro.
That's really good. I think I would go back and re-listen to that, guys, because that's really good, because I think it's important to hear that. A lot of people are waiting, I think, at times, and they're waiting for some sort of perfect opportunity. And Matt, you had a great quote that the opportunity. What was that quote? It was great. What is it?
Tragedy never happens at a convenient time. Neither does opportunity.
Right.
So, Ronnie, your deal in Ireland, like, it's never going to be the right time. Okay. So
that's good, man. That's so good.
Ronnie, go back there and make that offer.
You calling me out here before the show. We were talking about buying that. So yes, absolutely. And I think that's so good, because you'll figure it out. Just like what you said, right? Commitment breeding creativity. Like, when I think through that in my own life, the things that I've regretted, like the deals I've regretted, have been me being cautious, right? It's like, oh man, I just had my third baby, and I got to spend time here, and there was this deal, and you're like, you know what? It's all right. The next one will come. And then, like, 3 months later, you're like, dang, that other guy get it. And it's like, they're going to make like $600,000 on that deal. I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking? Right. And so, no, dude, that is so good.
Ronnie, you got to think about this, Ronnie. There'll always be a fourth or fifth kid. Like,
right.
Kid, forget the third kid.
I got 4 right now. I don't think I'm going any farther than that.
Don't waste, because you don't have to worry about the third kid. You have the fourth kid. It's good. They'll turn out fine.
I'm gonna get hate mail after this. And Matt, I don't know how many kids you have, but I like to tell people, especially when they have the first kid, I was like, you know what? That's awesome. I'm really excited for you. I was like, but one's just necessary. Like, you don't have kids until you have 2. Once you have 2, then you've got kids. So anyway, once you get to 3, then you're drowning. So
I love the commitment breeds creativity. I think that's perfect. I think that, I know you didn't coin that, but it's the first time I heard it, so I'll give you the credit for that. But yeah, I think that's really true. And the other thing is that I think people forget, when you were saying, Matt, like, you got to do a deal, and the problems that come up in deals that's part of the deal, right? The problem is part of the deal. So, like, people are like, well, I don't want those problems. Well, then you don't really want to grow, or you don't necessarily want to improve, because you need to have the problems, or what are we doing here? I mean, you're just going to stay the same. You're going to stay stagnant. And I really think that it's important that we stretch, and like the content zombie thing is so true. I mean, there's so many people that just read another guy. Well, let me read this other book. It's tough. And I think if you are listening to this and that's you, yeah, you got to go out and take some risk. And I think the other part of not taking risk is, maybe some of you listening to this, maybe some of you watching this, you have a problem with confidence. Because I think that the more confidence we have in ourselves, that allows us to take more risks. So if that's a problem, it's not real estate that you need to work on. It's probably you and getting better just as a person. So I'll leave that there. So, Ronnie, what are your thoughts?
Yes, Matt, I want to ask you maybe a very selfish question. And so I've been in real estate now for, gosh, it's coming on 10 years. Okay. Almost exclusively single family. I'm just starting to dip into commercial. I built 2 portfolios with creative financing, owner financing, and selling them. And I think, when people talk to me about commercial and jumping in and doing that, it's almost like commercial investing is the promised land, right? Like, that's kind of the change that I feel. It's like, dude, when you gonna come to the promised land, bro? When are you gonna come to the land of milk and honey? At what point is that deal number 1 that it literally changes your life? Is it a certain amount of units that it's like, okay, now I'm really experiencing freedom, where it's like, okay, I can sit back and decide, like, on a scale, on a threshold in your experience, when does that happen? When does that kind of threshold go over where it's, wow, this is amazing. Like, at what point is that? I'm really curious, and I haven't really asked that publicly or privately yet. And I was just really curious based on what you're saying and the projects you're doing, because that's where I want to go, right? Like, me personally, some of the stuff you're talking about is very similar to where I want to go. So I'll give you the mic.
So the threshold is an arbitrary place in your mind that you place it in. I think that, it is going to be dependent upon, confidence. And, I'll rewind back that, when I was a kid, the thing that absolutely scared me the most was kissing a girl. Okay. And when I finally had my first kiss, and it was like a peck on the cheek, right? I was just like, I didn't die, and that sort of thing. But we're all hardwired with this, with this thing, right?
And that was like a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah. So I think that, it comes down to, you just got to make the decision to do it. And also you have to make the decision is like, you're not going to do single family and commercial. It's like, you have to make the shift that, all right, I'm not doing this more single family stuff. Okay. I'm only buying stuff that's got, $200,000 a year in gross rents or more, located in these areas. Okay. And then just start thinking about that, driving by those properties, walking those properties with brokers or the owners. And then the more you start to get exposed to it, the more it builds your confidence. You start running the numbers in those properties. And the only thing that's different is just like some commas and some zeros. It's just a different like order of magnitude. It's the exact same business plan you did for single family houses, the exact same thing. It's just the order of magnitude is different. So I think that's kind of what's key in the whole thing. And eventually, for me, I did a little small mixed use property, right? And then I did a larger mixed use property, and then I did a 100% commercial office building. And because it was just, I started building that confidence, but it took me a while to do it. It's definitely, it's simple, but it's not easy to do that.
So it's what I'm hearing is it's almost like changing the increments in what you think. Instead of thinking in $100 bills, then you think in thousands, right? Because like in single family properties, my increments, even when I'm talking to like friends and family outside of work, it's like my mind just thinks like people are thinking like $10. I'm thinking in $1,000 increments. Mm-hmm. In commercial, it's, you know, $10,000 or $100,000 increments, where it's like, yo, $50,000 is the range. That's like 5 increments of negotiation rather than $1,000 increments. Would mm-hmm. that be, say, like, if that's the stretching where it's you're thinking about money and properties and analyzing it differently? It's not, yo, let's negotiate $10,000 off this $150,000 property. It's, no, we're looking at a $4 million building. I need it for $130,000 less. Mm-hmm. Would you say that's kind of the difference there, and just comfort level, or am I missing something?
No, I mean, I think that you're right on that. I mean, I don't think that you need to be like, okay, I have 40 or 50 or 100 single family houses. Now the universe gives me permission to go into the commercial space. But yeah, in terms of order of magnitude, it's just different levels of money. I mean, it's like, instead of going to one investor that you've always gone to do your single family deal, maybe you have to go to 10, or maybe you have to go to 5. There's certain relationships that I built where, talk about opportunity not happening at a convenient time. There was 2 properties that we were negotiating over the course of 2 years. Okay. And they both like dropped at the same time, and I had to raise $2 million in 3 days. Okay. And so like me back about, 10, 15 years ago would have been like, raising $50,000 was a big deal. So I think that things just change that way. And I do believe with Marty is that it definitely starts with, with the confidence and believing that you can do it. There's so many, and I just look out there in terms of the people that are real estate titans, like they're not that smart. Like they're just resourceful. They have really good work ethic. And they know how to get, and it's just about making deals. You're a chef, man. You're just putting the recipe together. That's it. You're not making a bowl of soup. You're making like a whole, stock pot of soup. Like it's not that different.
Matt's going right to food, talking about food, and it's lunchtime for him. Matt, let me ask you a couple of questions. And these are things we haven't really talked about. Do you have like a morning routine? Is there like because a lot of people I know, they're like, I got to get, a certain couple of things in. Just was curious about that for you.
I think being intentional about, starting your day. A lot of people will just be like, okay, well, my first engagement's at 7 o'clock in the morning, so therefore I have to get up at 6. Okay. I think just being intentional about, front loading your day with the most important things for me, because I struggle with ADD big time. The way I got off of Ritalin and Adderall was through exercise. So that's how I start off my day, is with exercise. What time is that? During the school year, while my wife is teaching, I have to get up at 4:30 in the morning to go to the gym and get back home so I can take care of the baby while my wife goes off to work. But this summer, get up at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Sometimes there's some mornings I get up at 7:30, depending upon my day and that sort of thing. So I do have a somewhat of a routine, but I think it's just between the exercise and then also, just taking time to like take a step back and be grateful for what you have too, and just the small little things too, like, geez, I woke up this morning. All right. I woke up this morning next to my wife, and at night, I'm sleeping under a roof. I'm sleeping inside. And so just, those types of things too, just kind of keep yourself grounded. Because dude, one thing is that when you grow bigger, the problems get bigger too. So, I was telling and it's almost become a problem for me, is like we had this plumbing leak in my house that, none of my tenants would have ever had the tolerance for this, but I had the tolerance for it in terms of just, there was just every time we gave my baby a bath, there would be this water be raining down into our dining room. Right. I'm just like, nah, it's no big deal. Like I got much bigger problems than that. So,
right.
But I think that, your threshold sort of like grows over time as you start to push the envelope and that muscle gets bigger. And so you can start to deal with those problems that would, normally just crush somebody. Like, there's things that I explain to people that are just like, oh my God, like how can you even deal with that? And I was like, it's just part of the business. Like it's no big deal. I don't lose sleep over it. So that's kind of the differences there.
Yeah, I needed to hear that because it's so true. I think working out is probably the most important part of my routine, without a doubt, because I'll tell you this, like for instance, Matt and I will go back and forth and we'll be talking. We might talk, and this is the key to a partnership. We might talk 15 times a day. And like if you call me, I'll patch you right in because I'm usually on the phone with Matt. So, but what we'll say, I can always notice him if he's kind of like a little snippy, is because he hasn't worked out. And it's the same thing with me. If I haven't worked out, I'm kind of a bastard to work with. So it's interesting because the problems, because God, there are a lot of problems. But when you work out, and like Matt, or like Drouin said, when you do some gratefulness, I'm just grateful for shelter. When you like the bare minimum of like what typically, hopefully all of us have: shelter, safety. Like you look at what's going on in the world. Like I always think about safety being something that I'm really grateful for lately. Obviously health, and then it's like, oh yeah, the big hole in the tenant roof that we got to take care of. It's like $20,000. That's okay. We're gonna get to it. We're gonna take care of it. But at least we're healthy and we have shelter. Mm-hmm. Ronnie, thoughts?
I really like that because I think it was actually to tag on a Grant Cardone quote. I think he says, like, if you have the same problems, you're not growing, right? You're kind of stuck. It's growth doesn't mean that we grow out of those problems. We grow into bigger problems. You know what I'm saying? We solve this set of problems. Now we're moving up to here. And that uncomfortableness, to kind of circle back to the beginning, I think being comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? The opportunity comes when we put ourselves out there. A year and a half ago, I bought this house, and we during COVID, we left and we basically turned in the keys to our rental, and we went overseas for 3 months during COVID. We went to Ireland we were in Ireland, and we went up to Scotland and Northern England, and we didn't have a place to come back to. We put literally our stuff in storage. We didn't know if we were going to be there 4 months or we are going to be there for a year. We were just like, we're going to do this, and everything's cheaper because of COVID, so let's just figure it out. And we took our whole family, and we came back. And when we came back, we got an Airbnb for 3 months. And I had 3 months to find a house. And I wasn't like 3 months to just get a house. Like, we wanted the house we wanted to stay in for a while. We didn't want to move again. So we had like very specific parameters. Like we want at least 3,500 square feet. We want this kind of lot. We want this amount of yard around us. And we had a timetable, and we had an end date that it had to be done by. And to kind of sum up what Matt has talked about in this episode, guys, is when you commit, and I think this is something that I can take, especially on the commercial side, when you decide to commit to something, whether that's going into a bigger asset class, whether that's doing your very first deal, whether that's buying a property to flip, whether that's getting into wholesaling, whether it's jumping into, storage units or massive multifamily, whatever that is, when you put yourself out there and you commit, man, to take it, like, you'll find a way, right? You will feel like your brain starts asking the right questions. And guys, I think that is amazing. And to kind of wrap it up, one of the things I like to do, Matt, when we are kind of coming to the end is kind of like key takeaways for the audience, right? Like if you could leave them with one thing, with one story of if this is my key nugget that you could take them away with, what would that be?
Yeah, if you're going to start on the commercial side of things, I know we talked about a lot of mindset type of stuff this episode, but I think starting out is if you're going to go into the commercial realm, not just multifamily commercial, but like let's say like office, industrial, retail, is try to find something that's occupied or at least has a level of occupancy that you can get regular financing on it. I'm definitely not telling anybody go buy a totally vacant historic car factory that's totally messed up and that's going to be your first commercial deal. Like I'm talking about myself, of course. Like, no, don't do that. You can make it in a way that it's digestible. Number two, biggest difference between commercial and residential is environmental. If you're buying a property with using a hard money lender, make sure you're doing environmental due diligence on any property that has any type of commercial component whatsoever. If there's a retail component or an office component and you have some apartments there, you're going to still want to do environmental due diligence, like a phase one environmental on there. And then, you might have to start talking to different banks. Your typical, there's different departments in the same community bank that you might be dealing with that do completely different products. So you want to make sure that you're teamed up with and talking to the right lender as well, because there's a bank that I partner with on a lot of deals that, I talked to my friends about. I was like, this bank is great. And I was like, oh, I talked to them and they told me this. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, it's like, right. So just being up to speed on that, I think is definitely some of the takeaways on the commercial side of things.
It's awesome. Marty, what about you, man? Last takeaways as we're circling.
Yeah, it's I think one of the things that Matt may have said here, or maybe it was at the Go Big event because it's all in my brain, but it's tell people what you do, and tell people what you're looking for. I think a lot of people are not really clear on what they're looking for. And so a lot of people want to help people. I think 99% of people want to help you, but if you don't really necessarily know what you're looking for, they can't help you. So I think it's really important to get really clear on what you're searching for, what you're looking for, what you're trying to buy, and then and letting people know that. The other thing is, Matt said this, and it really hit home to me, is McGuckin and I are buying commercial property now, and we're just not going to accept anymore the flips or the wholesale deals. We're just simply not going to accept them. It's just not something that is going to be. It's a standard. Our standards have raised. There's nothing against those things. It's just we can't be paying attention to those things and going into commercial at the same time. Like Matt said, pick one of them and go hard. And I think we've been dabbling in both because we like opportunities, and opportunities are good. And one really does do very well for us, which is the flips and wholesales. But there's one that's going to set us apart and one that's going to take us to the next level, and that's the commercial side. So I think that's important for people to know and hear, is that whatever it is you're going to do it, pick it, and then commitment will breed creativity, which we like.
That's awesome. Matt, I want to thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. Marty's finally brought you out and introduced you. He's talked about you a few times to me when we've been traveling and such. So thank you so much for coming out, talking kind of about the mindset and your story and your journey. Guys, we come here every Tuesday at noon Eastern time. And then our podcast comes out, the recorded kind of fine polished one comes out on any of your podcast providers, whether it's Apple or any of the others, on Thursday morning. So until next week, guys, thank you so much for being here. Peace.